Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this discussion on the game-changing solar rebate pricing for Victorian businesses. It's great to have your company and for joining us for this conversation, where we're going to talk about the rebate scheme offered by the Victorian government and the changes in it that means it might be good for your energy plans. We're also going to have a look at the renewable energy industry generally, and we've got some great people that we can talk to about that. I'll introduce them to you in a moment. I'm Helen Brown. It's lovely to have your company, and it's great to be able to support Energy Terrain and Ecovantage and their passionate desire to shift us all to more use of renewable energy. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. Now, before I introduce the panel, just a couple of housekeeping measures, so to speak. You will have a chance to ask questions. There'll be plenty of opportunities. You can do that via the chat or the Q&A section in the webinar portal in front of you. So pop your questions there. We're very happy to take them. And also we're going to have a poll a bit later on as well, and we'd love if you could participate in that. That would be very, very handy and a bit of fun as well. So before we speak to our panelists, why don't we learn a little bit more about them? And our first panelist this morning is Geoff, who is from Energy Terrain. He's a director with that company, and he leads their sales efforts. And he leads conversations every day with business across the country who are buying energy from grid suppliers, not knowing the generation source. So he's learned obviously a lot about what customers' needs are and how Energy Terrain can help them when it comes to putting in the right works for their program. Geoff, I'll have a quick chat with you. It'd be nice to, oh, there you are. Hello, and you're in lockdown, Melbourne.
Hello.
Like all
yes,
of us.
I am. Yes. Good morning, Helen. Thank you for that.
Good morning. Good morning. No worries. Tell me, Geoff, have you seen interest in energy and solar in particular grow in the last few years?
Undoubtedly, there's a lot of interest, and it continues to grow almost on a daily basis. The tone and tenor of conversations that we get to have with the market is increasingly sort of moving toward the motivator is being a participant in the renewable space as opposed to just looking for a cost reduction. So I think the needle is definitely moving on that front.
And can you give us a bit of a picture of the kinds of businesses that you are helping?
Yeah, the kinds of businesses that we help, it's quite a wide range. The common factor that drives the businesses that we help is where they have a consistently high energy use during the daylight hours, predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly. So this can be in the manufacturing sector in particular, or the intensive agriculture sector, dairy, pork farming and things of that nature, but also more broadly in hospitality and in light industrial settings as well. So, clearly for a solution of our nature to work, a client needs to have a good roof, but they also need to have an existing high energy load.
Great. Well, I look forward to chatting with you again very soon.
Sure.
Thank you. Let's meet our next panelist, Shanti Moore from Ecovantage. His current focus is to make large-scale solar as affordable as possible. And of course, that's what we're here to talk about, how we can do that for you. Shanti, you've had 10 years experience managing projects and growing businesses committed to making nature-based and energy solutions. That's what it says there, but tell us a bit more about what that actually means.
Sure. So I've had a bit of a broad range of experience. I started off working more in biodiversity projects. So I used to manage very large-scale biodiversity projects for offsets, for say somebody's doing some construction and they need to develop that land, they need to purchase some offsets. So I used to look after projects like that. And for mines. We used to look after the offsets for mines and then rehabilitating mines. So I used to work on a few nature-based projects prior to working in energy. For the last 4 years, I've been working in energy, working in energy efficiency and different energy solutions, including renewable certificates and solar. So bit of a transition, bit of a broad experience, totally different fields, you know, one's energy, one's biodiversity, but they actually merge together quite nicely.
I love it. I think it's a great mix. What do you like about working at Ecovantage?
So Ecovantage is a great company. Basically what we do is we take somebody's energy bill and we look at their energy bill and we figure out how we can take them from somebody that's, you know, fairly carbon dependent to a climate hero. So somebody that's either, if they want to go net zero, if they want to go carbon neutral, we can help them along that journey, and we can choose the projects that will get them there the quickest and at the same time will save them money. So it's really exciting because we're able to do, you know, two things at once: help the environment and help our customers reduce their capital costs.
Great. Thank you, Shanti. Looking forward to chatting with you as well. And finally, our third panelist, Geoff Lamb, also from Ecovantage. Geoff, you are the man with all the knowledge of how these sorts of policies come together. You've worked a lot with governments in this area. Can you tell us a bit about the breadth of your knowledge?
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, I guess I started out doing maintenance on power stations actually up at Liddell. I spent quite a bit of time many years ago now, and the world's changed a lot since then. It's a lot cleaner, or it's getting there, hopefully. So yeah, but I guess the most relevant is the last decade or so that I spent with the Victorian regulator, working on the Victorian Energy Upgrades scheme. Yeah, a really interesting, quite a groundbreaking scheme on a sort of on the world stage at the time, and still a very effective scheme. Yeah, and it was great to be involved in that from the start, from when it was launched. And yeah, I'd have to say it's great now to have moved to Ecovantage and be moving into a sort of a mode of trying to implement and provide at the coalface, for want of a better term, you know, what that scheme is set up to provide to customers.
Fantastic. All right. Well, lovely to meet you too. And I'll just ask Tiffany, our wonderful producer in the background, if she can pop us all up on screen, because I'll pop between you two. Sorry, I'll move between all of you. Pop between you two. I'll move between all of you now. We'll go through some questions. And Geoff, I'm going to start with you. You know, I support solar energy, of course, but I've never heard of the Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificates. However, I did a bit of research and found out that the rebate scheme for them has changed, and this is what makes them a bit more attractive. Well, not a bit more attractive. This is what makes them attractive now for businesses and something worth considering. So Geoff, could you just give us a rundown of what these certificates are?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Helen. So the scheme started in 2009, and it started primarily as a residential scheme, doing things like, you know, light globes and those sorts of basic things. And about 2012, I think, the Victorian Energy Upgrade scheme morphed a bit, started to include business, commercial and industrial sites. And quite soon after that, a thing called M&V, or measurement and verification, introduced. So that's kind of like a bespoke rather than a deemed or a fit for purpose, fit for everything, like a light globe sort of a thing. The M&V is more of a bespoke energy efficiency project and measurement sort of vehicle. And that's applicable to HVAC, to all sorts of different projects that might improve the energy efficiency of a site. And from way back then, solar on the roof was eligible, but it was only eligible if there was no export. So you had to use up all of your generation on site. Now, late last year, the policy owner, DELP, the state government department, changed that rule, and so the regulator was then allowed to approve solar VEEC projects which did export. The export isn't included in the certificates, but it's allowed to happen. So that's changed the game significantly. So therefore, this energy efficiency kind of vehicle has been expanded to renewables as well.
And why is that? Is it just because of the desire to move more into renewables to make it more attractive, easier to access?
I guess I'm not the regulator or the policy owner, but I suspect, as probably many of our listeners would be aware, there's kind of a merging of the energy efficiency and the renewable space in all sorts of ways in terms of demand response and all aspects. So I suspect they were cognizant of that and they decided to sort of move in that direction. It may also be a reaction to the fact that lighting, LED lighting, was becoming business as usual, and therefore they were moving to reduce the support that the scheme gave to that, and something needed to replace it. So they were hoping, I think, that M&V would step into that void, and Solar V is possibly one of the vehicles they were hoping to use.
And Tiffany, if you can go to the slide on, the question is obviously, can VEECs be used for solar? Now, this is a bit more technical, but basically you're saying that there will be a change coming as well, Geoff.
So yes, so I guess the scheme's set up to basically have one VEEC, or one Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificate, equal to 1 megawatt hour of energy saved. And that's how it was for about a decade or so. But as the electricity system becomes a little cleaner, the carbon intensity of a megawatt hour of electricity is reducing. And so the policy owner, DELP, have basically foreshadowed out for the next 5 years how the carbon intensity of electricity will reduce. It's currently 0.95 of a megawatt hour equals 1 VEEC. And it's actually going to reduce every year over the next 3 or 5 years up into 2025.
Right. Are these certificates hot property in the market, so to speak?
They certainly seem to be appreciating, or the price is strong at the moment, and I think that's, obviously I don't know, but I imagine that is a factor of those things that I mentioned earlier, how the lighting is likely to be retired as time goes on, and also as a result of this reducing energy intensity factor over the coming years. So an energy efficiency project that I do today will be worth X VEECs. In 3 or 4 years' time, it'll be worth less. So I'm going to need more projects for the same number of certificates, and the certificate target is actually slowly increasing over this coming few years. So the government's quite ambitious, and that's being reflected in the price of certificates.
That's interesting. We might come back to that, and we might even get a question on that. Geoff, thank you so much. I'll go to our other Geoff Cope from Energy Terrain. This, of course, all leads to the question of the requirements for claiming this certificate for solar. Can you talk us through that a bit, Geoff? Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, so insofar as the services that Energy Terrain provide, one of the things that we're very keen to assist and drive with our clients is to take care of all the required activities that swirl around the project. So in the event of certificates, the VEEC certificates that are in question, we partner with Ecovantage to manage that process, if you like, for our prospective clients, so that when they flick the switch on to draw the power for whatever purpose they need under their roof, the solar system that is on the roof and the grid supply that they're still connected to connects on, and they get on with their business. So the short answer there, or to summary point there, is to say that we take care of all the required application processes with Shanti and Geoff support at Ecovantage.
Okay, so if I was a business and I had a lot of roof space, as you'd mentioned,
yep,
and I'm looking at the certificate and thinking, great, solar is a way for me to create energy for my business, while I might also get a rebate. Now, I'm guessing there's going to have to be a certain size. I think you mentioned that before, Geoff Lamb. You're going to have to produce a certain amount of energy, for instance. And what else do you have to think about?
Yeah.
If you're coming into it cold and you're thinking, is this for me?
So I guess you've got to weigh up the other certificates that are available in the market. So there are the small energy certificates, STCs, that are available up to 100 kilowatts on the roof. So and VEECs are available either for the whole installation if it's larger than 100, or for the increment above 100. Say it's a 200 kilowatt system.
Yeah, but I think we're talking above 100, aren't we?
Generally speaking.
Yes. Yeah.
So I guess so there are some. I think you're probably asking me what the process of the VEEC creation and so forth and that whole process looks like, and because it's an energy efficiency scheme, we actually have to. It's not as simple as generation off the roof minus export equals certificates, which is the case for the LGCs and STCs. We actually have to look at the activity that the business conducts on site, be it a shopping centre or a manufacturing plant or a wholesale warehouse or whatever it is. And we actually have to measure the energy used on site. We have to do a baseline kind of analysis. We do some regression analysis, statistical analysis of a baseline period, generally a year before the installation. And we then do the same after the installation. And we have to compare those two statistical analyses, and the difference is the number of certificates. So, so it's not as simple as an STC or an LGC claim, but it is, I guess, far more lucrative in most cases. So that sort of makes it worth the effort.
Right. Okay. So I'm just going to get a slide popped up now, which I think was talking about what you were talking about, Geoff. Is that correct?
I think slide 9. That's perfect. Yes. So there's that. In the middle of the slide is the actual installation. It's called retrofit there. We've got a baseline period and an operating period, or a post-retrofit performance period, it says on this slide. And so what we do is we just create a statistical model of the baseline period, and then we use that in the operating period, and the difference, it's called savings there with a little arrow, is the certificates that can be claimed. And then they can be claimed in advance for the whole 10-year life of the certificate claim. So you can actually claim after that first year of operating period recording of data. You can then claim 10 years of certificates.
Right. Okay. And Geoff Lamb, where does Energy Terrain fit into this process then? You can help us understand that.
I can chime in there, Geoff Lamb.
Geoff, I got you wrong. I knew it would happen once.
So the important point to make about the role that the rebate plays in a solar power purchase agreement model, which is our service, is that the value of the rebate is factored into the overall cost of the installation and of the solution. So, and that's important for our customers because, as I said before, we take care of the establishment of the system and of the service. And then we charge them like an energy supplier would charge for any energy at the moment. And we charge a cents per kilowatt hour rate for the duration of our service, which can be vary, but 10 or 15 years is a common rule. So the point that Geoff Lamb makes there about the ability of the rebate to be claimed once early in the, I think after the first 12 months, therefore quite early in the tenure of a solar power purchase agreement that we offer, means that we can use those funds collectively on behalf of the client to assist with the installation. So because we can use the value, a current value of those claims, of those certificates in our establishment or setup costs of the solar system for a client, means that we can lower the unit costs that we will then charge them for the power. So in a way, Helen, it brings forward those future it does bring forward the future certificate value into today's money, and we can then use that to reduce the price that a client will pay us for energy into the future. So, and that, it's critical again to point out that, that administrative burden is part of the service that is taken care of upfront. So businesses, our clients, can concentrate on what they are doing with their business and not be burdened and weighed down by the, the requirements. And they are legitimate requirements that the authorities put on the management of these certificate programs.
Okay. I just wanted to remind people at this point that we can take questions. So if, I'm not asking the right questions, then feel free to offer yours, because it's really important that we hear from you and understand what you would like to learn about. Perhaps there's something that's already been mentioned that you'd like the speakers to explain a bit more, or you'd like more information around it. Or perhaps there is a question that hasn't come up yet, something about renewable energy in general. Please feel free to put those in. Now, as I said, you've got two options. You can put them in the chat down the bottom, or there is a Q&A segment as well. And I'm just double checking to make sure I haven't missed anything, and I can't see anything. So yeah, please do pop your questions in now, because I can tell you from experience, the sooner you get them in, the more likely they'll be answered. Okay, now we've got a bit of an overview, and we've talked about the value of this to business and why regulators might be moving in this direction. Of course, if you're a business, what you're thinking about is, well, how much can you save by utilising these certificates? Now, I'm guessing all three of you can have a touch on this subject. So who would like to go first?
I guess, I mean,
Shanti, great. I was hoping it was you. I didn't want to drag you in from the go.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite project dependent on how much you can save, because these are bespoke projects. So we customize the VEECs for each individual project. And I've got a little caption there that says around 30% of capital expenditure. So that's an experience that we've had throughout doing a lot of these type of projects. Is it's usually we're looking at about 30% of what the cost to put the solar in. So if you don't know what capital expenditure is, it's the cost of the solar. So that's usually about how much the rebates are covering there. So some of the factors, and I'll get to that graph in a second. I've just done a graph there to compare how much you're looking at for a certain system, but there's a few factors that affect how many VEECs that you can create. So one of those being the solar generations, which is obviously how big the system is and how much solar it can generate, and then also how big your export is. So how much of that energy is then being fed back into the grid. So we can't, as Geoff Lamb mentioned before, we take the megawatt hours that are generated by the system minus the export to see how much you're using on site. So that's an important caveat to this one. That's how we create this. Some of the other factors that are affecting how much you can save is the spot price of the actual VEECs. So VEECs, and like other different rebates, they're traded. So their price goes up and down on a daily basis. Right now, we're seeing a really high VEEC value, is the spot price, is what we call it, at around the $82 mark. And that's due to a few different factors. So your savings will be depend on those factors that I mentioned. In this graph, I've just given a couple of different examples. So we've got a 500 kilowatt system with a 10% export, and just a conservative spot price of about $75. And then, so there's two options that we've given there. You can do VEECs and STCs. So STCs you would do for the first 99.9 kilowatts. And then for the other 400 kilowatts, you would then do VEECs on that. So the reason you would do that is if you have cash flow issues and you want to get some cash flow up front, so you would do STCs. But in doing that, because STCs are at a much lower spot price, you're reducing how much capital you can get back on that. So the other side that I've given there, which is VEECs only, which is post measurement and verification. So Geoff's little map before on slide 9, you're getting a much larger rebate there. So yeah, if you look on slide 9, we can see that post after. So if we look at the end of the post retrofit performance period, that's the time that you would get these VEECs, and that's usually about 16 months, taking into consideration the construction, the retrofit, the engineering that we need to do. So you're looking about 16 months, and you'll get a much larger rebate if you wait until that period. You wait that period and you get those at that time. You're getting about $315,000 on a system, $315,000 at that time. So it's a much better payback than if you do a bit of a mixed payment there.
Right. Okay, that gives us something to work with. So that's great. Thanks, Shanti. And if anyone has a further question around that, as he says, you know, each project is bespoke, but that gives you some idea to work with. And we do have some questions coming up, which is great. I'll take one now and put it to the panelists. Who takes on the risk if the customer increases their energy consumption on site in the first 12 months? Who would like to answer that question? Is that Geoff Lamb or Shanti or Geoff Cope?
I'll offer up an opinion first, and the others can scuttle me or support me. I don't mind. But the point that if the power increase once the system has been established and the certificates have been applied for under the rules that we have already explained about the history of that site, so the 12-month history used to establish the measurement and verification, that doesn't affect those certificates into the future. And if there's greater energy consumption on the site within those 12 months or at any time in the future, that will just be met through whatever sources are available. That it won't affect the, to my mind, it's not going to affect the VEECs calculation that's been done. Is that Geoff Lamb, Shanti, if I got that right?
That's pretty right. So I think the question, you can split it into two. One is in terms of the PPA, who takes on the risk, and I think that's Geoff Cope's ballpark. But in terms of the VEEC claim, as long as there's a sort of a moderate increase in energy consumption over that that operating period, 12 months, that's acceptable, because for that to have happened, production presumably has increased or some other aspect of the site use has changed. And as long as those changes are moderate and measurable, the VEEC claim process can cope with that. If there's a major step change, if you're going to build another factory next door to your current factory, then that can be problematic. And it's important to, I guess, bring those sorts of plans to the table when we talk with someone about that possible project, because that can be a difficulty, and we may need to work around that and do some special, make an application to the regulator or whatever sort of thing. Yep.
I'll just add a little bit to what Geoff was saying there, and I think the difference between, so Geoff's talking about large energy changes, and when we've talked to the regulator, they've talked about routine changes. So routine changes being maybe changing your lights, maybe doing some maintenance on your HVAC, maybe doing some energy efficiency stuff, but nothing huge. When you start moving into the categories of non-routine maintenance, when you're expanding your factory or expanding your warehouse, then that is when there's a risk factor in there, and you need to get in contact with us and let us know, because that starts to move out of the parameters that the regulator has set.
Great, thank you. And a follow-up question, and some good questions here, so thank you for these. If I'm setting up a new business without prior data on energy consumption, can I still claim VEECs on my solar?
I'm happy to jump in there. So I guess the short answer, unfortunately, is no. As the energy efficiency scheme is predicated on that baseline operating period comparison, and therefore greenfield sites or moving your factory to a new site is pretty basically excluded. It's very difficult to do it there, but you've got the fallback position of your LGCs or STCs in those situations.
That's
Helen,
nice,
I had
short and sweet.
Yes.
Yes.
A question. Okay. I was going to ask Geoff and Shanti just to explain who are the purchasers of the certificates. I don't know that we covered that earlier on in the process.
No, good
and
point.
Subsequently, does the future price of certificates vary, even though we are talking about bringing the value of those 10 years, forward to to the 16-month mark that Shanti mentioned before?
Did you want me to jump in, Geoff?
You go, Shanti.
Yeah, so I'll jump in quick. Geoff has got a lot more experience with. He actually worked for the regulator for a long time, but what I can say is energy retailers. So large energy users are already paying for this scheme, and so if they look on their electricity bill, they'll see the VEEC scheme on their energy bill. So it's energy retailers, your big energy retailers, which are buying the certificates. Now, I think one of the things that you're asking about whether the certificate price will change. So we work with Energy Terrain. If we do it, we send out a quote for what your rebate's going to be. We'll lock in the value at the spot price, so it won't fluctuate with the market unless you ask us to have one that does move with the market, because you might think the market's going to go up. So that, to answer that question, your numbers might vary a percentage because your energy usage and your energy savings might change a little bit, but the spot price will lock in, so that won't change. Did you want to jump in, Geoff Lamb?
Very briefly, I'll just elaborate on what you were saying about who buys the certificates. So the retailers, as Shanti said, buy the certificates off Ecovantage and various other similar installation or intermediary companies. And our expertise is energy efficiency projects, and the energy retailers' expertise is obviously selling electricity, but the act that sets up the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme requires them to surrender a bunch of certificates each year in April to the regulator, and so they buy those off us. So that's where the certificate ends up.
Good. That's good to have that clarified. Thank you. We've also had raised a few times the role of Energy Terrain and PPA pricing, and I think it would be helpful if we had a look at that in a bit more detail. Geoff Cope, can you explain to us what the effect of these certificates would be on solar PPA pricing?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. The role of the VEECs rebates, or any other rebate, and Geoff Lamb has mentioned the STC program that's in place, and in different jurisdictions there are different rebate programs in place. But the role of the VEECs plays in our solar power purchase agreement pricing is it has the effect of lowering the cost of our installation. And that's important because we provide a very simple service in the end, insofar that our clients purchase the generated power of their roof at a fixed cents per kilowatt hour rate for the duration of the term. So therefore, if we're able to lower the cost of the upfront investment required to install the system, commission it, but also the ongoing maintenance and the management of it, the insuring of it, etc., we then can offer that client a much more competitive solar power purchase agreement rate at, for every kilowatt hour of energy that is generated on the roof. It's important to say that the changes that have been discussed this morning in the VEECs program, firstly, the ability to use solar because of the change that previously was in place, that preventing or only allowing it if you didn't export any solar. That change was significant from a solar power purchase agreement perspective, because we structure our systems so that, or design them purposely so that the vast majority of the energy is consumed under the roof. with only a small amount going to export. But there was always an export component. So previous to the point in time late last year where that change occurred, the VEECs program, whilst it was on offer for us to use, it was very difficult and cumbersome to use and didn't suit very many clients who were interested in a power purchase agreement model with us. So I guess the ability to bring those, the value forward has the effect of helping us lower the cost that we need to invest to install, and therefore improves the economic equation for the client. And I guess the final point there to make is that it was a significant change in, wasn't just 1 or 2% different in the type of impact it had on the cost, but as Shanti highlighted before, it can be as much as 25–30% of the install cost can be covered through the upfront value of the VEECs in question. So it has really shifted the dial significantly for those clients or prospective clients we have, where they've got a setting which can both generate or accommodate rather systems larger than 100 kilowatts on their roof, but also where they are using the vast majority of that power under the roof, so got a high energy load.
Okay.
Any questions to that? Yeah.
Not yet. I think they're all looking at your numbers and that nice green arrow going up.
Yes, very, very graphically astute I am.
Yes, please. We have got some questions coming in. One of them does relate to the schemes offered in other states, or we also mentioned the national scheme earlier as well. And that is something I wanted to get back to, because while we are talking about the Victorian scheme, it would be good to have a look at the others and compare. And Shanti, I think you've got some information about that, how the Victorian energy certificates compared to rebates, other rebates available in Australia. Can you take us through that a bit? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So realistically, there's only one certificate that you can compare with VEECs, because there's no other certificates available for systems over that 99.9 or over the 100 kilowatt system size. So we can only really look at and compare with LGCs, and that's what I'll compare with a bit here. But one of the things so currently we're looking at LGCs at around, they're trading at about $35, $36. And that's been a significant decline. So they've declined over the last few years. Back in 2017, you're looking at about the $90 mark for these certificates. So, and I'll just talk a little bit about LGCs. So LGC stands for Large Scale Generation Certificate, and that's the federal scheme. So there's a few reasons that you've seen those certificates drop such a steep decline in their certificate price, and that's because there's been a number of other rebates available, but one of the big things is there's a huge number of projects have come online, and that includes a lot of solar farms which generate massive amounts of megawatt hours, and each of those megawatt hours that they're generating is eligible to get an LGC. So you've got a market, and it's all about supply demand. So you've got a market where your supply is going up from all of these solar farms, these large wind projects, and your supply is going up, but the demand has remained fairly similar. And I'll contrast this with VEECs. So VEECs is obviously, as it stands, Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificate. It's a state-based scheme. So that value of the certificate, we've seen a massive increase. And Geoff alluded to one of the reasons, which was the reduction in lighting, which was one of the main bodies where VEECs were created from, but that's been wound back. So the supply side of that has decreased. He also talked about emissions factor going down as the grid cleans up. So that's both of these factors are driving up the price of these. Victoria, the VEU, which is the Victorian Energy Upgrades, who looks after this, they've got quite high, lofty goals. They're trying to push towards net zero. So what they're asking from energy retailers is they're asking them to purchase more of these certificates, and that's another factor that's driving up the price of these. Now, from a customer's point of view, I'll talk about the comparison on a different level. So when you get paid from LGCs, you get drip fed an income yearly. So your LGCs come into each year based on how many megawatt hours you generate from your solar system. We talked about how VEECs are created earlier, and I won't go too much into the detail of that, but what you do with VEECs after we've created them and it's energy saved on site, we forward create 10 years. So you get that as a lump sum. You're not getting that year by year by year. You're getting that as a lump sum. So that's a big difference. You're getting a big chunk of money. Whereas getting drip fed that money on LGCs, and also with LGCs, the certificate price is trending downwards. So there's a big difference in what you can earn from the two. So that's probably the best comparison between the two. And other than that, I think STCs is something that factors in here, but that's more for systems under the 100 kilowatt. And like I said in my previous slide, you can do a combination. If cash flow is an issue and you want something when you energize your solar system, you can get STCs and then do VEECs on the rest of it if you want to get a bit of cash flow just straight off the bat.
Right. There's a lot going on.
A lot of information there.
But obviously, yes, there are other schemes. Yes, some work. The Victorian scheme is a very good one. And to understand it better, you are the people to talk to.
Exactly.
You've clearly got all the knowledge that's come through.
It's the best going.
I think one of the things.
Yeah.
Sorry, Geoff, you go.
I was going to just make the comment from from I guess my vantage point in the industry, the requirement that the Victorian government or the Victorian regulator has on the retailers to purchase the certificates seems to be the key difference between the effectiveness of VEECs versus the effectiveness of LGCs. For example, if you've got a large supply of LGCs coming into the market, but a smaller market to buy them, then that's obviously going to have a downward impact on their value. Whereas from what I've learned from you guys is that the regulator in Victoria has managed, can throttle up and down both sides of that supply and demand requirements, and therefore keep a meaningful value in the market for VEECs. Is that a reasonable summation? Or
it's probably more, Geoff, that the government, as the kind of the boss of the regulator, if you like, and the policy department have actually ramped up their ambition year on year. So they've set the targets out to 2025, I think, and they increase every year. So basically, as Shanti was saying, the fact that plus the fact that the intensity factor is reducing over that same period of time means that the number of projects has to increase quite significantly, and that's what's helping the price.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Good. That's good to know. We have a poll, and I think we should launch the poll at this point, and ask people if they could kindly have a go at this for us. What is your biggest barrier to an energy efficiency upgrade? You've got several options there. Note to producer, can they choose more than one? I'll get an answer on that and find out. Also, the hosts and panelists can't vote. Oh, that's a shame. But fill that out. We'll keep that up for a while until we get closer to the end of the webinar, and we'll come back and have a look at some of those answers. So what is your biggest barrier to an energy efficiency upgrade? And yes, I think I'm getting a thumbs up, which I'm pretty sure means I think you can answer more than one. So there you go. Tick as many boxes as are relevant to you. and enjoy that poll while we keep tracking on. And I am now just checking to see if we've missed any important information.
Helen, I've got one.
Because we've got, yes,
the...
go ahead, Geoff. And I've also got one of your cool graphs here that we haven't shown yet.
Oh, cool. I've got a question I can see. Is there a cap on the amount that can be claimed through VEECs? Which I can quickly answer. It's 50,000 VEECs at any one point in time, which you probably don't need to worry too much about. That's a pretty significant solar system, 50,000 certificates. So yeah, there is a cap, and that's imposed, I assume, by the regulator and the policy owner, just to so the market doesn't get distorted too much, but it's not really a problem for a solar VEEC claim.
Okay, that's excellent.
A bit of an outlier,
Thank
right,
you.
Geoff? you wouldn't get many systems where they're self-consuming that kind of. We're talking megawatt large systems, like probably above 4 megawatts type of system.
Yeah, I know that you're not the regulator, Geoff Lamb or Shanti or Geoff Cope, but it's interesting that there is this move to encouraging businesses to take up more solar. Given your knowledge of national and state schemes, where does Victoria sit in that mix in terms of the progressiveness of the policies? Is that something you can answer?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So Victoria is progressive, is at the front of the pack, if you like. The national scheme, the ACCUs, Australian Carbon Credit Units, are they, Shanti? Also allow solar certificates, but because of the much lower price, the ACCUs, it's not really a viable opportunity at the moment, because the red tape almost eats up all of the certificate price, if you like. So yeah, Victoria is alone at this stage in state schemes, which are New South Wales, South Australia, and Victoria, in supporting solar VEECs. So definitely out in front. I believe, I imagine the other states are considering it, but at this stage, Victoria is the only one to have it in place.
That's interesting. Thank you.
We'd love to see it in the other states. We'd love to see it in South Australia, in Queensland. And we'd love to see it in New South Wales taking it up. They have the capacity to do it. Just need a nudge.
Is it the political will?
I think
Possibly.
Victoria, as Geoff said, they've set really high and like ambitious net zero targets, and this is all about getting towards net zero. So they're doing that by encouraging solar through solar VEECs, and they've been the pioneer of doing solar using this type of energy efficiency certificate, or measurement and verification is the way that we measure it.
So that one big policy area of net zero can create so much change, obviously.
Huge.
We have another question from the audience. How is the PPA affected if VEECs are not awarded, or the number of anticipated VEECs is less than quoted? I'm thinking that's a multi-answer. So perhaps if I go to Geoff Cope first, and then Ecovantage can talk about the next one, if I'm reading it right.
Yeah. Like I think it's a really valid question. If you boil it all down, if a VEECs application is not applicable to a site where we would want it to be applied, we'll know that before we finalise the solar PPA. So therefore, the impact would be that the actual physical cost of the install would not be reduced through that rebate, and therefore the cost of the power that we would sell from the system we install would be higher than what it would be if the VEECs application was successful. So, but we'll know that prior to finalising and commissioning. So it's not like a retrograde situation that would need to be applied. It would be, we would know upfront. I'll let Shanti or Geoff Lamb answer the part about them changing in the future, but I don't think they can once they're locked in. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think we get a lot of questions, and this is probably due to it being a relatively pioneering type of project. And I'll just talk about, so measurement and verification has been around for many years. It's just only just been brought into solar in Victoria for solar. And then solar rebates, Victorian energy efficiency certificates have been around for years as well. So then neither of those two parts are new. It's just combining those two in a state-based scheme is new. And a lot of people are concerned that they might not get their VEECs. They're concerned that maybe for some situation might arise, they won't get their VEECs. But realistically, the regulator wants you to create VEECs. They don't, they're going to work with us as much as they can to be able to create those VEECs. So if there's small changes, if you've got a warehouse and you have to shut down due to a COVID lockdown or something like that, they've given us the ability to fiddle around with the data to take that into consideration. So they're actively working with us as the creators of these VEECs to help get these projects through. So the risk factor on these is not as, I think because it's new, people start going, what about this, what about this, what about this? But what I think is important to remember in that situation is the regulator wants these created. They want to reach those net zero targets. The retailers have to buy these certificates, and there's not the supply coming in from other things. So it's important to remember that. And Geoff, if you wanted to jump in.
Can I just jump in very quickly? I guess I'm just going to get a bit risky politically here for a moment. For me, it's a bit like a vaccination. There's a risk getting vaccinated, but there's probably a fairly big risk not getting vaccinated. And I think the VEET scheme and the regulators are probably a bit similar. Like there's always a risk when you're dealing with the government and certificates that there might be a problem. But I think that has to be weighed against the significant risk of not progressing and not moving with the times and getting solar on your roof. So that's how I would view it.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Thanks for those answers. That's good. We're coming towards the end of the webinar, and I just wanted to make sure that people who'd wanted to take the poll had had a chance to do that. So thank you to those who have jumped in. That's great. We appreciate that. We'll put the results up in a minute. We will be closing it in about a minute or two though. So if you would like to take that poll, please do. Just Tiffany, if you could pop that up on the screen again quickly, just to give people a chance, unless it is on screen and I just can't see it. Yes, I'll just make sure that comes back up for you, or take it down the bottom. There we go. Click on the bottom of your Zoom webinar platform and the poll will come up. And we'll close that shortly. All right, before we finish, I think just a quick run around from each of our fantastic panelists on a bit of a wrap of the session. I mean, everyone loves, well, no, okay, let me rephrase this. Renewable energy is obviously a hot topic. There is huge support for it. You're talking about a scheme that you say is progressive and is worth people looking at. So I'd like to get one sentence from each of you on businesses who really want to look into this now. What is one of the first things they should do, aside from contacting you, and we'll provide some information around that. If you're a business, what's one thing you could start doing now to think more about these certificates? And I'm going to go to Geoff Lamb first. Doesn't have to be the whole thing, Geoff, just step number 1, 3 or 5. Pressure.
Can I initially draw people's attention to Stephen Grocot's answer to our last question, which is basically that the PPA price is contractually guaranteed, so that Energy to Rain will actually wear the risk of any issues with the M&B process. So that's a good good risk mitigation strategy. In terms of your question, Helen, what can I say? The world is moving fast and it's getting faster. So I would say get on board. The train is leaving the station, and there's so much to gain from getting into this, zero carbon sort of world, not only in terms of, cost, but in terms of, your customer base support, all those things. Yeah.
Yep. Great. And thanks for pointing out that response in the Q&A too. If anyone wants to have a look at that, it's just in the Q&A box. Shanti, what would you do?
For customers, look, I think, why would I get solar, or why even move on this? Would be, I think you have to ask yourself the question, do I want to keep paying an energy retailer bulk amounts of money each month when I have a huge roof that I can put solar on, and I can start, maybe there's a capital outlay, and maybe that capital outlay is expensive and I'm afraid to bring that up. But when you start looking at your return on investment, when you start looking at, hey, I can actually produce my own energy, it's a bit of a no-brainer. You just this now is the time that is going to be the cheapest to get that solar on your roof. Solar prices have just dove, getting the solar installed, and the price of these rebates is massively high at the moment, and you're going to be physically creating your own energy. So go for it. There's no reason not to.
Cool. And to Geoff Cope, who handles the capital cost of installation.
Yeah, my one-liner would be to say that we take care of the capital, we take care of the process, and we can supply you rooftop generated energy at fixed rates for fixed term. Send me a bill.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much. And that's where we'll leave it. Before we go, let me just read out a couple of numbers for you in case you would like to follow up. If you'd like to talk to Ecovantage, the number is 02. Oh, I just lost it off my screen. Sorry. Give me a moment. There we go. 02 8090 5623. So that's Shanti and Geoff at Ecovantage, 02 8090 5623. And if you'd like to talk to Energy Terrain, the number is 1300 721 335. So that again for Energy Terrain is 1300 721 335. And just before we finish, if we can have a look at the poll, Tiffany, how did that go? Do we have the results of that? Thank you very much. I'll just give everyone a quick look because it's always interesting to see who's in the room and what's going on. And of course, the biggest one was capital expenditure and long-term commitment. Yeah, that's fair enough. And also I'm a tenant, not property owner. And I think we've covered some of the questions that you might have, but of course, please call these guys if you have any more. That'd be only to be too happy to answer your questions and talk you through whatever other clarification you need. And thanks so much for joining us. It's been lovely to have you here to talk about this subject. Thanks for taking the time. We do appreciate it very much. We hope it's been of use to you. My thanks to our fantastic panelists, Geoff and Shanti from Ecovantage and Geoff from Energy Terrain. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your answers and the time you've put into answering these and providing the information. And thanks for asking me to be your host. I've learned a lot and it's been great. Of course, the information from this webinar will be made available. If you call those numbers or pop on to their websites, you'll get a response in terms of any of the information that came up in the webinars as well. They can pass that on to you, I'm sure. That's all for now. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And yeah, I look forward to another chat about solar energy. It's been great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.